Hello again. It is Saturday, February 21st, 6:30 in the morning, and I'm just recording this straight using my laptop camera because it's kind of like where you wake up if you're trying to record your dreams and you just need to grab something right there so you don't forget everything, and you just want to get it down quick and dirty. And that's what I'm trying to do here, is just get some of these thoughts down for myself, for looking back at, and just for anyone who can benefit from them. And I don't have the time or the energy or feel that it's necessary to make this really nice and clean video. I think it's more about the information contained, and the people that are really looking for it will find it. And the more different formats, the diversity of content out there will be great. And I'm not trying to make money off of this or anything. I'm just trying to help myself and also help people like myself that are looking to improve their life through, after a lifetime of having no mental imagery and poor episodic memory, autobiographical memory, improve their lives. And I'm going to take some sips of tea every now and then, so enjoy the little pauses if you can. Excuse me. So yeah, this is, I guess, an Aphantasia update, an update on my progress, but also just want to talk a lot about this amazing book and this amazing person, Win Wenger. I think he was a junior, if you will. I think his actual first name is Clarence. Win is a abbreviation, I think, of his middle name, and last name Wenger. I'm sure I'll eventually learn the full name and learn more about him, but he wrote this book called the Einstein Factor, and I think the title was appropriate for how the information was marketed, quote unquote marketed, as some sort of, unfortunate. I kind of view it as an unfortunate choice in regards to marketing it that way. It's of course, there was probably a time in which people, including now, are trying to increase their IQ and increased intelligence, because in this world information age especially, it's there's still physical labor, but a lot of the work is done by, determined by how sharp you are and what you can do with your mind. And so there's a big marketplace for people who probably want to improve that. But I think that this book was ahead of its time, in that at the time of its publishing, people still don't know about aphantasia and visualization, and how incredible it is, and that there's a large group of people that exist that don't have the ability to do that. And so the contrast, it becomes very distinct of for these individuals, including myself, how different life is when you don't have these abilities. And therefore, how if you do have the ability to do normal visualization, how powerful that is. And then even besides that, I think the greater message that Dr. Wenger was trying to promote, and the original point of his book and image streaming, which is all the book is mostly about, is that you have this quote unquote inner oracle that you can consult for deeper knowledge and wisdom. Besides the fact that they studied apparently that you can raise your IQ by 20 points just through, moderate amount of practice, daily practice doing image streaming. That would be wonderful if that happens. And intelligence is a hard thing to measure, and there's several different types of intelligences, probably not just several, but for me personally, and I think for what Dr. Zeman made more mainstream by coining the term aphantasia. I think that his work has a broader and perhaps more needed application. It's interesting because I've learned through listening to his audio courses, which is, I think, a form of the book. I haven't actually read the physical copy. The audio versions of the Einstein Factor is more like a guided course. There's music, there's pauses for you to like do image streaming and practice it with the audio recording. It doesn't, in the way he's talking, it doesn't sound like an actual book. It sounds like he's just talking about this topic. Excuse me. And yeah, this image streaming, and like after aphantasia was coined and made like more like known in the wider scientific community and just like in general in the public, that this is something like a blind mind's eye, like I see that there's a big need for this, because he himself, even though there wasn't the term for most of his life, it only was coined 6 years before he died, aphantasia that is, he brings out the fact that he was a non-visualizer, that he couldn't visualize, and that it took him a long time and a lot of effort to actually start being able to see and have mental imagery. So there's so much there in this book, and I was just blown away by it yesterday after listening to it, and then just like practicing it a little bit that night, and then practicing about an hour and a half to 2 hours of it in a liminal-ish state, but still like very much awake. And there's a lot there, and it's really incredible. So I was like, I gotta record this and talk about it a little bit. So, well, not just a little bit. We're already 7 minutes in. I guess I wanted to start by saying there's some key principles in regards to how to image stream. Number one is you have to speak out loud what you're seeing and what you're experiencing. When I say what you're experiencing, I mean that it's not just what you see in your mind's eye. It's what you're experiencing, whether you're hearing sounds, whether you're experiencing and recalling emotions, you're smelling things. Anything that's nonverbal, you want to speak. Again, I think when people get the idea, they want a quick fix, and so they think about, they read and hear, okay, image streaming, these are the few steps that you got to do, and that's it, and it's just this like mechanical process. But this is, when you listen to the book and you really start thinking about it, it's a very deep process that I think if you really understand what you're trying to do, it becomes much more rich, and you can do it with much more intention, and you can stick with it longer, and you'll have actual results in doing it, which is, where I seem to be with this. So there's this idea that your subconscious is running all the time, and for those, especially for those of us with aphantasia, we aren't able to discern the messages, this activity. We cannot discern the images, the visual images. We can't discern the songs or sounds that it's picking up or playing or whatever it's doing. Like, we can't pick up on these things. People with hyperphantasia or close to it, friends that I've spoken to, people I've listened to or read about on Reddit, they talk about this, that there are these channels that are they just tune into them, and they're just playing, and they can watch these movies or hear these stories, and things are playing out, and it's not that they're consciously creating these things, though they can consciously create mental imagery. It's like they're tuning into them and just listening and watching them. And I have a friend very brilliant friend, and she works in mental health and has studied a lot of, I think it's like brain. She studied psychology and just knows a lot about the brain. And she talks about like having like 3 or 4 or 5 different channels that she can tune into, and they have different qualities of like vividness and I think content as well, as far as what she can access. And she'll access these while driving, and just do a lot of like her story processing where she's just tuning in. And so when you think about image streaming, is not just like, oh, I'm trying to see things when I can't, like especially if you have aphantasia, I'm trying to see things behind my eyelids and like rubbing them and like talk about something that isn't happening. Like I would quit right away, and I did quit right away. It's like, this doesn't make sense. But when you think about it as that your mind, and I've referred to it as like the right mind, and surprisingly, even in the recording, Dr. Wenger kind of slips it in and talks about the right mind. Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor, in her presentation, talks about how the right mind, the right brain, the right hemisphere is like the visual thinker. Sorry, I'm sitting by the fire. It's getting kind of warm, finally. And so when you think about it as like this thing that you're tapping into, and that you have to learn how to become sensitive to and hear these signals, and that there are ways to like kind of like nudge it and nudge yourself towards picking in and tuning into these stations, if you will, like your creative mind, subconscious mind. And there may be more to it than that. I personally believe that there may be other things behind, it's deeper than that there are different layers up to this. But even just from a materialist, like scientific aspect of just the brain itself, and that's something that it can do marvelously that we don't like fully understand. If you view it as tapping into something that is kind of alive on its own and doing its thing, your subconscious, it takes a much different flavor. And I think this is important. So first thing, like I mentioned, is like you have to say these things out loud that you're seeing. And at first, you're not seeing much of anything when you have aphantasia. You close your eyes and there's just the phosphenes and there's nothing else. And it's like, how can you sit there for 10 minutes and talk about static? Like, what is that? It seems ridiculous. I kind of have come back to it after a year, and having learned recently about pareidolia effects, which is something that even Leonardo da Vinci referred to, and other people that can visualize will tell you about, is that when you look at like patterns, random patterns on the wall, stains on the wall, as Leonardo da Vinci put it, or a friend recently told me if you look at the textures in rocks, he would see faces. That's the pareidolia effect. And then autogaugia is like when you close your eyes and you're looking at the phosphenes, besides like it must be like the pareidolia effect mixed in with your mind's eye creating imagery. But a year ago, I would see absolutely nothing behind my eyes when I would close them and look. And now, especially depending on the state, like if I'm really, really relaxed, but in general, I can always see a particular image which involves a mouth, like closed lips. And then also like the eye sockets and the nose indentation of like or crevice of like a skull. And that's where it kind of just starts. So there are ways to like start seeing things even in like a completely just like regular relaxed state, when you close your eyes and it's just like, oh, I can see things. I actually see these lips and things fully awake, fully sober, like no like relaxation needed. I'm in the shower. there's like this faux marble texture or something else, like I'll see it right away, which is happening, and I never had that before. So it's definitely due to like training and practice and other things that have helped. But again, I'm just going to repeat these things, and it'll be clear, it'll stick, and it'll be something that I can make an outline of later. You're supposed to say these things out loud. You need to say them in the present tense. Like, even if it was a flash and it passed by, you need to say it as in, I am seeing, present tense, continuous present tense. I am seeing, and then you describe it. I think that is about reinforcing, and he talks about it a little bit in the book, and I think later on, like in chapter 5 of the audio course out of like 12 or 13, it reinforces you believing that, oh, I'm seeing something. And I've heard about this before, but like you convincing, you're like believing that you're seeing something, I don't know if emotionally or physiologically it engages something in that your brain, like you're telling your brain you're actually seeing something, and so it like activates other parts of your neural network to like actually be like, oh, let's get engaged because we're seeing something, we're looking at something, like this is an image. I don't know how it works, but I had like some really crazy effects last night that I want to talk about, and it was using this method, image streaming, and so like this worked. So say it out loud. I had some experience with actually just talking in my mind. So I think that works too, but I think it's probably better and more effective if you speak out loud, even if it's in a quiet voice. He says to speak to someone else, and image streaming, to speak to someone else or use a voice recorder, which for last night, I did it before I went to bed. I did 10 minutes and I used a voice recorder. That was pretty good, but it was like I experienced some like deeper effects of image streaming just this morning after like coming out of sleep, which is that really sweet spot of a liminal state when you're lingering in the theta brainwave pattern states, heavy states, and then like entering into alpha, going back into theta. And I only recently like learned what those brainwave patterns like actually represent. So for those who don't know, these brainwave patterns are basically like they're distinct representations of brain wave patterns, and what that means is like the oscillations, like like the speed of the oscillations of these brainwave patterns. So faster, and then more slowly as these things are. And I don't know how to represent it with motion, but I have a general, like just very basic. Those Greek letters represent the different brainwave patterns, and they are not intuitive because they named the patterns as they discovered them, and they didn't discover them in the order of like slowest to fastest. So for example, the slowest brainwave pattern is delta. Or I guess it's not. Yeah, it is delta. It is delta, but it wasn't the first discovered, so it wasn't named alpha. It's like the letter D in our alphabet. So I think it's like the fourth. It's the fourth discovered, and late. It was discovered second to last. So delta is like the slowest. That's when we're in like our deep sleep and our body is recovering. And I'm just spitting this off without using notes and like just barely learning about this. But then there's theta, which is the dream space and the meditative space. It's also the oscillations are very slow. So you're relaxed, you're calm, and these are slow brainwave patterns. Then you've got alpha, which is like you're coming out of sleep, you're calm, you're relaxed, and you're just like chill. And just chill in general. You could be during the day, and you've been up for hours. Then there's beta, which is like you're problem solving, you're not as relaxed, you're thinking about things. And so we talked about delta, theta, alpha, beta, and then gamma is the last one. And that's like the fastest brainwave pattern, and these are like measured in hertz. I don't have it up in front of me, but you can look these up. But that's only like 5% of the time then during the day, I guess, that we enter that state. It was the last discovered, once we had the tools to like look and like be able to measure these different patterns. And those are like periods of like epiphanies and like really focused insights and things like that. Beta brainwave pattern can be like when we're also anxious, and it can like, apparently according to ChatGPT, it thinks that I'm probably like a lot of more than normal in like beta mode, a beta male, just because of like highly analytical, just thinking about things all the time, verbal, and yeah, that's the quote unquote perhaps overthinking, which I hate that word. But the reason I list all these is because when it comes to like the instruction to do image streaming, you're supposed to be in a really relaxed mode, relaxed state of being. And the way to get into that is through breathing, which last year I did like for the full year. It took me like one session per month. I did breath work for the first time. And it's like this rebirthing technique where you have this continuous breathing, though it's like really like heavy breathing. It was difficult for me because my nose, like my turbinates would dry up and get irritated and hurt and get clogged, and it was like hard to breathe that way. But it's interesting that in this book, the Einstein Factor, which I will call image streaming for Aphants, I'm just joking, but it could be called that because it's not really the Einstein Factor. It's supposed to like make you smarter, but it really is about how to visualize and how to like access these deep wells of knowledge through visualization. So it's a kind of a misnomer. I think it was like perhaps way ahead of its time, though I will say a lot of people have benefited from it. And I've seen like on Dr. Wenger's obituary, people were just like so sad, and like his work changed their lives. With that said, I've gone on yet another tangent. Well, that's just how it's going to be, I guess. When it's early in the morning and I'm excited and I'm not getting a lot of sleep, though enough, I'm not like sleep deprived, but sometimes I'll lose my train of thought. But yeah, you're supposed to be in a relaxed mode, and breath work, I did that last year. In the book, he talks about this velvety smooth breathing, and it's cool because his voice is actually the one reading and giving this course in the audio version. Velvety smooth breathing, and it's like there's this whole thing to like get in the mode to do image streaming. And I believe that through this breathing method and through this relaxation, you're actually dropping into a lower brainwave pattern. So let's say you're in beta, you're dropping into alpha. As you do it more, you're dropping into theta. And like that is really where the sweet spot is for like allowing you to tune in and tap into this subconscious state. And do practice. Like when you start building stronger mental imagery, I would imagine that like it does get more vivid, and you'll get better at being able to listen, and these signals will get stronger, and these neural pathways these grooves will get deeper and deeper, and you won't have to like, you'll have other effects start happening, and you won't necessarily have to like drop into a different brainwave state in order to like hear these signals, because they'll be louder and you'll be better at like recognizing them and all that. But especially for someone who can barely pick up on them, you have to like change your brain state wave pattern through. And this is the most natural method. There are other methods involving psychedelics, but they're mostly can be temporary. This seems to be like a permanent way um, to do that through, and it's like accessible anytime. It's like you just breathe and slow down and breathe, and then like especially do it like early in the morning or before you go to bed, because that seems to be like when like it's dark and you're calm and your body is just like, okay, it's time to start getting ready for sleep, to start relaxing, and then your brain just normally just starts kind of like going into those states. So I talked about so far speaking out loud, talking in the present tense. You need to be in a relaxed state. Your brain needs to be in a relaxed state. And I was never a visual dreamer until like the last, 8 months to a year or so. But as you can see, when your brain is starting to relax and you're in that like theta state and you're asleep, a lot of people with aphantasia apparently have had visual dreams their whole life, very vivid visual dreams. I was not one of them. But that's just, again, proof that if you're in a relaxed, different mind state, and sleep is a whole nother thing, but like you can experience imagery differently. But in this case, you're staying awake. There's other instructions, but I'm not recalling them clearly like right away. So as they come up, I'll mention them. But those are the like some of the main things. So for me, I just want to I realize that there are different ways of doing image streaming. And what I mean by that is you can talk about the autogogic effects, the pareidolia, like what you're seeing behind your eyelids. That's one channel, if you will. And for me, like that channel is it's just saying one thing over and over and over, pretty much. It has started to shift, but it's pretty solid. It's like lips. These are the lips. It's the same image of the lips. It's different variations. Sometimes the lips open. Sometimes they show me their teeth. But it's very clear. There's I say it's very clear. It's a persistent image. Certain aspects of this image, this autogogic, mostly it feels like because it's just the static of the dark gray with like lighter areas, like pulsing lights and things like that. And that changes with practice and state too, even though at first it just seems like there's nothing, but that changes with state. But these lips are mostly like grayscale, like there's no pink or any type of color. It's just like whatever that is when you close your eyes. It's not called black. I recently learned it's called something else, that color. It's like, and then there's lighter areas that could be like a muted neon white or something, but it's not white. It's like, it's hard to describe the color. I'll get better with descriptive words, but it's just that. And so that's one channel. And as you are just talking and just relaxing and just going, like those lips become more persistent and they change shape and they're like actually animating, becoming like slightly animated. It's not just a static image. It's like moving around, it's shifting. Sometimes, like I said, it's slightly opening its lip. I'm talking about it, I'm embellishing it sometimes, I'm nudging it along, I'm using descriptive words, which brings me to another like commandment of image streaming. When you're image streaming, you don't want to just describe like, I see a square, I see a circle, I see, that is very left brain and very analytical. That may be all you see, but you need to like use descriptive words, sensory words to describe it. Notice how you feel, talk about that. notice like, oh, it is a very sharp edge, razor sharp edge on the corner of the lips. And you see how I use the word razor. It may invoke more than just saying, oh, it's an acute angle or something like that. So you want to use descriptive words like involving color and texture, things that are easier for you to understand what it would be like in real life. And for someone else, if they were hearing you, to understand what that thing is, like the true nature of that thing. Like, is it the lips are smooth and glossy, and I can see the highlights on the individual folds that remind me of a million ribbons or something like that, you know. As if you were a poet, speak poetically. And that can be something you train, and I plan on training on my own, is like how to build my descriptive vocabulary and speak poetically about what I'm seeing. Because what you're doing is you are encouraging the imagery to evolve, and you are stimulating the mind's eye. But that's the first channel. It's like the autogogic, it's like behind the eyelids, and it doesn't really change much, but I feel like it's a stepping stone to another channel because it gets you going. And in the book, Dr. Wenger says it really doesn't matter how you get going with image streaming. In this case, that's the autogogic pareidolik effect. He said it doesn't really matter how you get going, it's just that once you get in the flow, that's the point. So there's probably a bunch of different ways to get into like image streaming itself, like just choose a random scene from a book. And there is a bunch of ideas of how to get image streaming going, especially if you have if you have aphantasia. He doesn't use the word because it wasn't around, but he does talk about being a non-visualizer himself for a long time and ideas of how to start getting imagery when you've never had it. And some of these are just like, imagine this scene, you're walking up this meadow to this large tree. And so that's one example of a specific scenario that you're trying to just think about to get like image streaming rolling. So again, it doesn't matter how to get image streaming rolling, but one way is, the pareidolik effect, the more well-known way of like rubbing your eyes or looking at a bright light, not too bright, but looking at a light for like 30 seconds to a minute and then closing your eyes and looking at the phosphenes. That is not image streaming. It is a way to get image streaming rolling. The second channel that happens is like where I think is the real, like that's the real deal. Like that's the real image streaming, in that it's not just a static topic or theme like what I experienced, and it's not just like what you're seeing in front of, essentially like projecting onto your eyelids. And that is like whatever thoughts, like random thoughts, and the imaginative world starts like bleeding into your consciousness, and it becomes like things that you can actually mention. They can come from memories, like pictures you've seen, people you know, and then it can also just be this like wild idea that has no basis in like reality, no seeming basis in reality. And I experienced quite like deep levels of that this morning, like from 4 a.m. to like 6 a.m. or 5:30 a.m. I'm not exactly sure of the time, but I was hearing like songs playing. Like I would think of a song that I know from like a movie, and I've had this happen like over the course of the last couple of days too, where songs will start coming in my head and they never used to do that, and I just like go along with them, and I'm kind of like coming up with the words, but the song pops into my head for some reason, and I'm kind of like I'm not hearing it, but I'm like, I know it, and I'm like 5% I'm hearing it, 95% I'm kind of like singing it to myself. But in this image streaming state that I was in this morning, like all sorts of things were happening. I am like narrating what I'm seeing like 80% of the time. Some of the times I'm just chilling. But I was at one point hearing like a piano start playing like piano keys, and it was like kind of a chilling, like unsettling piano. Like heard it from something before, but it was this tune, and I don't know the tune. I'm just listening to this piano play, and I'm like, okay. I've experienced this before while falling asleep, like once or twice before. One that I can remember. Another time I wrote about like several months ago, and I'm like, wow, I don't even remember that because it was like falling asleep. But I'm like hearing the piano play. I'm like talking to myself, saying, okay, I'm hearing a piano play this tune. I don't even know it, so it's not like I'm like playing the tune in my head to myself. It's not that. I'm like actually listening to this channel that's playing. And then like that would fade away, and then like, okay, so there's two things. Number one, I can like consciously think of things and like keep an idea going. Like if something pops into my head and I'm like describing, okay, I'm seeing this thing, and I'm gonna like elaborate on it because I'm not actually seeing enough detail, but I want to like try to keep it going. So like the right mind's like, hey, here's an idea, and the left mind's like, oh, okay, let me talk about this idea. And since it was so brief and so not vivid, like let me just add a few more details of like what this thing represents to me. But like once like an image would come up, or an idea, a nonverbal thought would come up, and I would describe it like, oh, I'm seeing this thing, and it would fade out, and I'd be waiting for the next image to come up spontaneously. While I'm waiting for that next image to come back spontaneously, I will then like focus back on the autogogic pareidolik lips and skull and whatever is coming up, and sometime it would shift. So I'm going back and forth between like this one channel and then this other channel. This one channel I just got to wait for. This other channel, it's pretty much constant, like in this alpha, theta, like brainwave state. Like close my eyes and I've been doing it, and it's just like lips, 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 just skull, whatever. Not like disorienting or like annoying, but it's there. So I can, and then something else comes up, and whether it's a sound or emotion. I've experienced this before. Like there's like two times last night, and then like one time this morning, where there's like this quick flash of like light, and I'm like, whoa, like what the heck? So I don't know what that's about, but there's quick flashes of light. There's colors mixed with emotion. There's like music playing. There's songs that come to my head that I then like play out and sing in my mind, and then I'm like saying, okay, this song is coming up, and then I'll go with it, and then I'll build something. Like I'll actively try to build something. So like a Prayer by Madonna, which was like sung for Deadpool versus Wolverine. I'm imagining like this chorus, and I'm elaborating on it and thinking sensorily about like this chorus, and like them in this huge like cathedral type church, and then like near the entrance, like this dark figure comes in, but he like won't like go any further. And so I'm picturing this, but I'm also like consciously building this based on like what these suggestions are from like the subconscious. Like the ideas of these things are coming non-verbally to me, and then I'm verbally speaking what I'm seeing, and then just elaborating and like painting a clear picture. So like one thing is like an idea that like, okay, here's a crazy idea, non-verbal thought, and then like verbally I'm gonna flesh it out. And then like once there's not, then I'm like fudging it too much, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna let that go. And then I just wait, and then I'm just talking about the lips, and then the colors, and like the morphing, and how they're morphing and shaping and moving, and I'm describing that. And so it's like there's always something to talk about. A year ago when I was practicing this, like I just tried it for like, I don't know, 30 seconds to a minute, like this form, and it was just like there's nothing to talk about. I had done it once before where I'm like, I'm not seeing anything, but I'm like ideas and concepts of a story, and I did that for like a long period, but that was like one time. But it didn't feel like I was actually doing image streaming because I'm not seeing anything. It was just the subconscious mind giving me these concepts of a story, and I felt like it was just me coming up with a story like I would for like a comic book or something like that. So yeah, that was crazy last night. I even like started slipping into some hypnagogic visions where I would I don't know, I didn't actually fall back asleep because I'm like talking about these things, like I'm aware of them, but it was a brief flash. I saw like this forest scene with like this green background and these like silhouettes of these trees. I saw there was a point where in my autogogic like pareidolia behind my eyelids, I saw shapes like a triangle with an eye in the middle, which a friend of mine had just told me about, and I had read his message like upon waking at like 4 a.m. and then like started doing more image streaming, and then like that was one of the elements that came up for me. Um, it is kind of like a dream state though, in that like a lot of the elements, there were so many that I couldn't recall them all and tell you about them, but I could see why doing like 10 minutes of this like every day for, until you have like a good number of hours under your belt would keep producing like more pronounced imagery. So I am definitely a believer in image streaming at this point. Like I mentioned, I think it's the title of the book, the Einstein Factor. It's like, what is this book even about? I think it was written during a time when people were all hyped up on Einstein, Albert Einstein, and I had posters of him. And like, I think that this book was, you know, a lot of the reasons why it didn't appeal to me is like the marketing behind it. Even listening to the audio tracks, I'm like, there's this other person who's like narrating, in this chapter we're going to learn this and this will help you to do this and improve your life. And I'm like, and the music's so like really cheesy, and I'm like, wow. I find it amusing, but you can see that they were really trying to market this. Maybe because like he wanted it to spread like this idea, this really deep, beautiful idea, and this was the way to do it. But like just listening to it, I'm like, this is like one of the most amazing things, and it's just wrapped up in this like really poorly designed package, if you will. And so that's too bad, but I hope that, and I don't know like all the image streaming material that's out there, but I hope that people with aphantasia will look at this as like a guide to opening up their mind's eye. And already they are. That's how I originally learned about image streaming. And when Wenger was like, there was a YouTube video by a photographer who talked about it. He didn't go like into like real depth though, as far as like the how and like the real deep meaning behind it. It was just like, oh, I did this, I rubbed my eyes, I started practicing it, and months later, whatever, I know I can have clear vision, which if you just take it as that and just try it, it's like, nope, that didn't work. Okay, move on to the next thing. This seems like a hopeless cause to like be able to have a mind's eye. So you just like dismiss it and move on, is I think what happens. So I think that's probably enough about image streaming and Dr. Wenger for now. There's some interesting things coming up in the next chapters about like memory banks and things. So maybe in the future I'll talk about that. But I'm just like, my mind is blown by, and like through my experience with this and like the content and how it just like fits in perfectly with so many other things I've learned in regards to breath work, meditation, like lateral specialization of the brain, different like brainwave patterns, and everything. It's just like, wow, just these people were speaking the same language and discovering some of the same things at the same time. So it's really cool, drawing on the right side of the brain. But in regards to my personal update, like I said, I've been more often having songs come up in my head during the course of the day. I noticed that within the last couple of days. I've noticed also that I'm thinking of I'm noticing and picking up on mental imagery during the course of normal conversations, where people will say words and it'll make me think of that person, like someone's face, or I'll think of a concept non-verbally as they're just casually speaking, or as I'm casually speaking. Like I was in a cafe this morning, late morning or early afternoon, and like if I were to tell you, yeah, I was sitting down with my friend, I'm inclined to think of him in visual terms, in the quality of his voice and the sound of his voice, and like also in emotional terms as far as like, oh, I was excited to see him. We hadn't seen each other in like a really long time. And if I were to say, oh yeah, I was, first of all, the memory is not even hardly as accessible if I'm not thinking of it in those terms. But if I were to talk about it, it would be without all of that. And it's almost getting hard to think of like, how did I do that? Like, how did I talk about? So it's becoming, I'm getting on the path where it's becoming more natural to incorporate sensory thought and visualization in like everyday conversations. There are moments, like I said, and I think it's the brainwave state, like in beta when I'm like driving on the road and I'm like getting lost and trying to find my way, like there is no visualization happening. Like I'm too focused on like what I'm doing. But if I'm like relaxed, I'm just noticing like probably 4 or 5 times yesterday where I was like, oh, interesting, like something came up, while this person said this thing. I automatically associated it with something else. And like I said in my other video, developing those rich associations between words and mental imagery of sounds, tastes, other things is like, I think that is the key, which is what the Einstein Factor is like really trying to help you do. I guess I'll end with this, which is something I said before, but I feel like I have to say it every time, or often. It's so important in that not only do you need to ABC, always be creating in here and learn how to listen to what your mind is like telling you, the subconscious mind, but we need to, in order to encode our memories better, but also to give our subconscious more to work with, more material to work with, we need to, at times, be more quote unquote present with our sensory experience in the now. The colors and the emotions behind the colors that come up when image streaming and like entering those altered states of mind and like being open to hearing like what it has to say, like I can imagine certain ways in which it can be there if you're not like feeding it something to work with. But in general, I think just on a basic level, if you're not feeling excited about colors that you see in the real world, it's not going to come out in like your like imagination. It's not going to happen. And I think it's been part of like my success, and it's been like a year of learning and like slow attention. Now I'm like giving it like actual and real, regular, intentional attention. But I think that's part of my success, is that I've also been trying to learn how to see, with my eyes for the first time. And of course I've been seeing my whole life and been able to read books and walk without, tripping, and like I can use my senses to navigate the world. But it was in a very mechanical, like shallow use of it. You can imagine, there's a book, I remember getting it from Scholastic when I was a kid. It was called Animorphs, and it's about these kids who get this ability to basically morph into animals from this alien that comes to Earth. And at any rate, the alien himself like turns into a human and like gets to experience eating food for the first time in like a mall food court. And he's like going from table to table and like scarfing up like leftover food and crumbs and like just going wild because he's never eaten food before. And it's like this novel thing for him. And for us, like I think we take our senses so for granted because we've had them our whole lives. And so, like, seeing colors and noticing tastes, it's like we just, like, for me, it's just like verbal mind thinking about things, and just like, I wasn't truly someone who was always enjoying, like, there'd be times and instances, but I wasn't really doing it as often and as deeply. So, like, when you're having a conversation with someone, you're not just paying attention to their words and the concepts and thinking about what am I going to reply with. There's a mode that you can get in, and I think you just like drop into like this alpha state or something, where brainwave state, where you're just like super calm, and you're just like allowing the sound of their voice to just like massage you, and you're just like taking in the audio quality of their voice. And it's like this really, it's almost like their voice becomes like a spell, and it's like all these emotions start coming up, but you're really trying to pay attention to, like, if I had to memorize this person's voice, let me listen to it in a way that I'm like catching like all the qualities. You just like open up your ear to hearing that. Could be their voice, it could be the sound of water, it could be the sound of fire crackling. You're just like really paying attention to your senses. Touch, smell, sight, all these senses, we can like really focus in, like when we're going for a walk, when we're hugging a friend, or whatever experience we're having, we can really turn up the receptors and like pay attention to like that color green, and like really notice it, maybe think about it using sensory thought. Doing that is like filling up the tank for like these signals and this mental this imagination. And the new part for me is like, okay, not only am I letting these senses and these experiences like really soak in and pull them in, but I am learning that we need to associate them with language. That this language that I've been relying on and using only a small portion of, there's a very sensory enabling side of language that we can use, so that when we hear the words scarlet or velvet or damp, that we'll start using those kinds of words in our normal everyday speech, but then they'll also be tied to these experiences and these emotions and these memories. And so when someone says damp, a mental image and experience will come up, and even if it's very slight and very vague, there'll be something there as opposed to nothing. And then that way, when you're doing your image streaming and you're like, oh, there's this feeling of dampness, in your brain, it's already wired to be connected to that experience when you were, when it was raining and you were in your car and it was damp and musky, and you were like, oh, and then so you'll start thinking about that time when you were in your car, better episodic memory, better autobiographical memory, but then you'll start imagining a car in relation to, wait a second, you were just on an alien planet. So now all of a sudden you're driving your car on this alien planet, and it's going to start flying and going up into the clouds, something like that. So using our language, this descriptive, poetic, sensory language, and tying it into this deep listening of the world around us is, I think, like a huge thing. Most people don't have to do that, but people with hyperphantasia and HSAM, highly superior autobiographical memory, they, according to studies, and they may not be the best or whatever, I don't know how many studies there are, but they had two habits, like fantasy proneness and absorption. And the second, I mentioned this once before, absorption is being absorbed in like your experience in the now, like really taking it in. And people who are storytellers and poets, they probably don't know what they're doing, but by writing and using these descriptive terms and this descriptive language and tying it into their experiences, like they're doing naturally what we're trying to do, what I'm trying to do, and learn after 40 years of life and doing the opposite of that. So yeah, a lot of progress so far. I bought some books on poetry that I want to like read a little bit and like really start building my descriptive vocabulary. I thought about, I've looked for, and I didn't really see, but I thought about making a deck of cards, like 100 cards with an image on the front and a description of like, you know, forests, like the boggy swamp or something like that. And then on the back have like 5 to 10 words that you can use and try to use to describe the scene. So you can like look at the image and like try to describe it and like really build your descriptive vocabulary and like associate these descriptive terms with an image, you know. It's better if you can do that with in real life, but I think these cards might be useful to myself and others, you know. It could be good for writers, it could be good for artists, but I think in my case, for people with no mental imagery that are trying to build like this, maybe that's the memory bank that is going to be talked about next in the book. I don't know. I assumed it was like some sort of memory palace technique. But these cards, you know, I thought about this concept, kind of like oracle cards or oracle cards, right? It's this oracle that we're listening to, this subconscious. So that's an idea that came up, but I'm super excited. It's almost like I'm making these videos and I'm like on this spaceship on this alien planet, and it's like, oh my goodness, it's day 2, and you know, these are the things that are happening, and I gotta like record this thing to send it back to Earth. Is what it feels like a little bit. So I'm really passionate about it, and actually I want to end on that note. Anytime you get passionate about something, like, and excited about it, something, and you express that excitement and enthusiasm and this weirdness, there's the chance that someone's gonna like try to squelch your enthusiasm. And actually in the book, the Einstein Factor, it talks about this squelcher, which is this internal thing in your mind trying to like clamp down on the subconscious and be like, okay, and the need to like work with that. But in this case, I'm talking about people in your life, real, not yourself in your mind squelching thoughts, but this enthusiasm, if you have an enthusiasm and passion for this and you were really like excited about learning and like how life is changing for you, and you're frustrated and you're sad and you're angry or you're excited about all these things and you want to talk about them, like it's so awesome to find people that you can actually talk to about that. But I would say be aware that there will be people who will say that you're talking too much about this thing, or that like, okay, you know, they will discourage you, like, why are you spending your time on this, like, and don't let that discourage you. And sometimes there are people who are like negative in that way and about a lot of things, and I would say it's really important to consider whether they're friends or, you know, romantic partners even, like whether their presence will like hold you back from like what's really passionate for you and like alive for you. Because something I learned is that I'm on like a very transformational I'm at a very transformational stage in my life in regards to personal like healing and growth, like old wounds, belief systems. My mind in itself is changing in regards to mental imagery and how I experience the world, like being able to remember things from the past and like access deep wounds and like come out of like really old patterns. And it's like I've been in a cocoon and like trapped in it and like struggling, and like now I'm like trying to break out, and like there's like the first scent of this fresh air, and like I need to, you know, expand my wings and like really start flying. But then someone's like, no, stay, don't leave the cocoon, like what's the point of doing that, like why are you leaving, why are you doing these things? And like I need to fly, right? And you need to fly. And if I'm during like this most transformational part of my life, I can't afford to have or be in contact with people that are going to be like negative towards or discouraging that growth and that change. Like it will, that in itself, it's hard enough to try to learn these things on your own and I mean with the help of others, but you're doing this out of your own will and no one's like forcing you to do it, right? And that is enough, right? That's more than enough. But doing it when alone, when it's like kind of new frontier, can be challenging in itself. And it's a hard thing that we're trying to do. So on top of that, if you have someone in your life that is like discouraging you or making fun of you or telling you that's not important, like that in itself will probably hold you back from achieving what you want. And that's whether that's mental imagery, achieving, mental imagery, overcoming aphantasia, or, becoming a famous artist or writing a book or traveling to another country. If you have someone that is like, oh, that's stupid, and that's what you're hearing, and not just hearing that, but if they're taking up your time and your energy and all that, like it can affect you. So think about that and, how you want to move on from there, because it may be that out of love for yourself that you have to decide, okay, well, you're my friend, but you might start spending less time with that person, or express to them like, hey, like this isn't helpful. And if they respond well, then great, that's awesome. Maybe they'll start being encouraging. But if they don't respond well, then we are all free agents for the most part. Like thankfully, like I live in an area where I have a great deal of freedom, and sometimes the prisons that we are trapped in are ones that we we might not have created them in the first place, but we keep ourselves in them, by not changing things. So that's my last message. I have had to go through a bit of that myself. I'm not just speaking theoretically. And so if I hadn't made certain changes, then there would be so many like new things that I wouldn't have gotten to experience, like amazing things. And so it's like very difficult, very painful to like detach and like remove oneself from these connections, but it will, like, you'll be rewarded like 100-fold is what I've experienced. So lesson for myself, future self looking back on this, and for any of those who made it to the end, I hope you enjoyed me ramble on. I think those who are actually going to make progress with this mental imagery are those who have the patience and not the digital age foddered, short attention span, which is something that I'm combating in myself. Like it takes a dedication to this and like time, and it's not going to be a quick fix, but in the in the grand scheme of things, when you look back, like even if you spent 2 to 5 years, like going from zero mental imagery to like full, like imaginative worlds being created and, that you can draw on, like 2 to 5 years, like people spend that much time to get a degree, like a piece of paper that they don't do anything with. So it's worth the time, it's worth the effort. So thanks for listening, and until next time.